Growing up, my family never screamed at me. They didn't have to. The silence was louder. I wasn't beaten or locked in a basement. I wasn't even insulted, not directly. No, they had a more elegant method: erasure. In the family photos, I was always blurry or cropped out. At reunions, I was the quiet one, the afterthought, the obligatory +1 my mother sometimes forgot to mention. My sister, Vanessa? She was the symphony. I was white noise. By the time I was 12, they'd already decided who I was: the failure. The odd one. The maybe he's just a late bloomer. That turned into, he's not like the rest of us. While Vanessa racked up spelling bee trophies, I was told to stay out of the way. She got piano lessons, I got handed a mop and responsibility. It wasn't that I lacked ability. I just wasn't shiny. I read books instead of bragging. I helped with bills instead of building a social presence. But none of that earned me a seat at the real table. Not when Vanessa existed, beautiful, blonde, brilliant Vanessa, who could lie with a smile and still get an applause. I remember the day my mom said it like a casual truth while sipping wine with her friends in the living room. Vanessa's our miracle. Our golden child. And Matthew, well, some children bloom, and some just never take root. They laughed. I was standing 10 feet away. She didn't even flinch. That was the moment I stopped trying to bloom. By the time I hit 18, I was barely a whisper in that house. Vanessa had already been accepted to Stanford. I had just been laid off from my part-time job after the store closed down. My father's solution? You're a man now. Figure it out. My mother's? A blank stare. So I packed 2 bags, a cheap laptop, and my dignity, what was left of it, and left. I didn't leave a note. I doubt they would have read it anyway. I disappeared. And that's when I truly began to exist. They told everyone I had failed. That I couldn't keep up. That I was the family burden they'd carried for too long. But what they didn't know: I didn't fail. I built. And one day I knew I'd return. Not with fireworks or vengeance. No. I'd return with silence. The same kind they gave me. Only this time, mine would echo. 15 years passed. I built a life without them. A damn good one. Not that they'd know. I changed my last name legally. Cut ties so thoroughly that even the IRS couldn't find me for a year. I worked hard, studied harder, and eventually created something of value, a quiet little company that specialized in digital forensics. We audited cybersecurity breaches for major corporations. If your database got hacked and you didn't want it in the news, you called us. Nobody cared who I was. Just what I could do. And what I could do was make a problem disappear. It was ironic, really. For someone who'd been erased his whole life, I had become an expert in making things vanish. And then last month, I saw her name again for the first time in over a decade. Vanessa Whitmore, Federal Fraud Investigation. Trial set for May 3rd. It popped up on an alert system we used internally. Her name was tied to a forensic audit I'd helped with. I almost choked on my coffee. I stared at the headline for a long time. 15 years, no contact, and suddenly my sister was standing trial. For wire fraud. For manipulating financial systems at the tech startup she co-founded. Millions stolen. Falsified statements. Money laundering. And it all came crashing down because she underestimated a routine digital trace, one I personally built the framework for. The irony burned hotter than the coffee in my throat. I didn't plan to attend. Not at first. But the closer the date got, the more I felt something twist in my gut. Not joy. Not even revenge. Just gravity. Like something was pulling me back into their orbit. And for once, I wanted to see the world crumble the way mine had, slowly, quietly, and with everyone pretending they didn't notice the cracks. So I flew in. Unannounced. Unrecognized. I wore a plain suit. Sat 3 rows back, dead center. The courtroom was cold. Vanessa sat at the defense table in a pale blue blazer, perfectly tailored. Her hair was still immaculate, even as the media snapped photos and whispered. Our mother sat to the side, flanked by 2 women I didn't recognize. Probably friends who'd been told that Matthew doesn't exist anymore. She didn't notice me. No one did. Until the judge arrived. He took his seat. Scanned the courtroom. Paused. Looked directly at me. Tilted his head. Squinted. And then, with a soft frown, he whispered, so quietly only the court clerk heard him. "Wait, you're—" The clerk looked startled. She leaned in. The judge glanced at his notes. Then back at me. "Court is now in session," he said firmly, but his eyes stayed locked on mine for one beat longer than necessary. My mother turned to see what he was looking at. Her eyes widened. Her jaw dropped slightly. For the first time in my life, I saw her speechless. Vanessa didn't even notice. She wouldn't. She never looked back. The silence after the judge looked at me stretched longer than it should have. My mother's expression? Somewhere between a ghost sighting and a wine glass shattering mid-toast. She didn't blink. She didn't breathe. I don't even think her lips moved when she mouthed my name under her breath, like it might summon me back to the grave she'd buried me in years ago. Matthew. But I didn't move. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I just nodded, once. Vanessa didn't notice. She was too busy whispering to her attorney, flipping through documents like she hadn't built her empire on lies. Her face wore that same high-gloss confidence she had at 17, the day she left for Stanford while I was scrubbing the grout in our parents' kitchen with an old toothbrush. The judge cleared his throat. "Let's proceed." But something had shifted. Not just in the room. In the atmosphere. Like my presence had pulled the pin out of a grenade no one realized was sitting in the middle of the courtroom. The prosecution started making their case, and I kept my eyes on Vanessa. She didn't flinch. Not when they mentioned fraudulent documents. Not when they displayed screenshots of offshore transfers. Not even when they showed a slide of an internal system breach that clearly traced back to her. That breach? I recognized the fingerprint. Not metaphorically, literally. The digital forensics audit they used? It was built on a code signature I developed. A redundancy layer only one firm had implemented in the past 5 years. My firm. She was being taken down by a system I created. I almost felt bad. Almost. My mother finally looked away from me and turned back to Vanessa, her chosen child, the pride and joy, the walking PR package. But she looked rattled. Her composure cracked every time the prosecution added another piece of evidence. And every few minutes she'd glance back at me again. Like I was the embodiment of some prophecy she refused to believe in. As if I had come not to witness, but to judge. But I wasn't there for revenge. I was there for recognition. Not applause. Not closure. Just to be seen. Finally. At lunch break, I stood slowly. The crowd shuffled out into the hall. I could feel the weight of eyes on me as I moved, hers especially. My mother didn't even try to pretend anymore. She followed me with her gaze like she was trying to memorize every feature she'd forgotten. I walked to the water fountain. That's when I heard the voice behind me. "Matthew." I turned. She looked older. Shorter. Smaller than I remembered. The heels were still expensive, the pearl earrings still polished. But the woman in front of me wasn't the untouchable socialite from my childhood. She was a mother caught in a lie that was finally collapsing. "Hi, Mom," I said. Her lips trembled. "We thought you were gone. That you wanted nothing to do with us. You made that decision for me." She opened her mouth. Closed it again. Like she was grasping for a script she hadn't rehearsed. You've done well," she said finally. "I have," I replied simply. She nodded slowly. "You always were resourceful. Just quiet." That word. Quiet. I had been their dirty secret, their invisible shame. And now? I was the quiet architect of their undoing. "You knew?" she asked suddenly. "You knew about the case?" I looked her in the eye. "I helped build the system that caught her." She blinked stunned. For a second, I thought she might faint. "I didn't come here for drama," I added. "I came because I needed to see it." "See what?" "What happens to golden children when the lies run out?" She turned pale. "This is vengeance, then?" "No," I said. This is accountability. She reached out like she wanted to touch my arm, like the past 15 years hadn't happened. I stepped back. And then, from behind her, another voice chimed in. Mom? Vanessa stood at the edge of the hallway, confusion written across her face. Who are you talking to? My mother hesitated. Vanessa looked at me. Her eyes narrowed. Something flickered across her expression, confusion, familiarity, and then, a cold shiver of realization. No, she said. You're not. I smiled. Hello, Vanessa? She blinked. But you're dead. My smile widened just slightly. No. Just forgotten. Vanessa stood like she'd seen a ghost. Her perfect courtroom poker face flickered, cracks forming behind the mask. She stepped forward once, then stopped, like getting closer might confirm what she couldn't accept. You're Matthew? She whispered, eyes darting around to see if anyone else heard. I didn't say a word. Confirmation wasn't necessary. Recognition was already setting her nerves on fire. Mom said you left the country. She muttered louder now. She said you changed your name. She said you didn't want anything to do with us. She's half right, I said calmly. My mother flinched. Vanessa blinked again, and her voice dropped. What are you doing here? I leaned against the wall, folding my arms. Same as you. Watching the consequences. She scoffed, trying to recenter herself. Don't act like you're better than me. You disappeared. I shrugged. And you committed federal crimes. So I think we both had plans. Her lips curled, but there was something fragile behind it. She wasn't used to losing control, especially not in public. Especially not with me. What's your angle? She snapped. I smiled. That's the thing. I don't have one. A pause. Vanessa turned to my mother. You invited him? No, she hissed. I had no idea he'd even be here. I thought he was in. I don't know. Matthew, where have you been? Busy, I replied, brushing imaginary lint off my sleeve. I've been building something you all thought I couldn't. Vanessa crossed her arms. So what, you show up now because you want a front row seat? Some twisted satisfaction? I tilted my head. No. I came to see if either of you would admit what you did. They exchanged a glance. A guilty, panicked glance. That told me more than anything else could have. When court resumed after lunch, the energy had shifted. The defense attorney stumbled on his words. Vanessa sat stiffer in her seat. My mother's hands trembled as she folded them in her lap. I watched them from the same position, third row, center, like a shadow they couldn't shake. Then came the part one didn't expect. The prosecution called a witness. A surprise one. They said his name, and my head snapped up. Mr. Carter, please approach the bench. I blinked. Wait. What? I didn't give them my name. I had registered only as an observer. No credentials, no tags, no alerts. The judge looked directly at me. Mr. Matthew Carter, correct? I stood slowly. Every chair in the room creaked. Whispers spread like wildfire. My mother gasped audibly. Vanessa froze. Yes, Your Honor, I said evenly. The bailiff motioned toward the witness stand. I walked there on autopilot. I didn't even glance at Vanessa as I passed her. But I felt her burning stare like a sunbeam through glass. They swore me in. The prosecution smiled faintly. Mr. Carter, thank you for agreeing to speak. We understand your presence here today was not originally announced. That's correct, I said. Could you state your occupation for the court? I run a digital forensics firm, I said. We specialize in breach audits, financial anomalies, cybercrimes, especially corporate fraud. And is it true your firm was one of the consultants during the investigation into Miss Vanessa Whitmore's company? It is, I said. My team flagged the breach that triggered the initial inquiry. Vanessa's chair squeaked as she shifted. The courtroom was dead silent. The attorney continued. Are you aware that Miss Whitmore is your biological sister? I am. And that you were estranged? For 15 years. I confirmed. Can you explain briefly why? I turned to the courtroom, looking directly at my mother. Because I was the family's disposable child. Because they decided my silence was easier to maintain than their guilt. No one moved. Not a breath. Even the judge sat completely still. Vanessa's lawyer looked like he wanted to evaporate. And, I added, because sometimes survival means walking away. Not to punish anyone, but because staying would have buried me. The room held its breath after I spoke. You'd think I just dropped a bomb. Maybe I had. Even the court reporter paused before continuing to type. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard like she wasn't sure if what she just heard was real. Vanessa's jaw clenched so hard, I thought she'd chip a tooth. The judge cleared his throat slowly. Mr. Carter, thank you for your honesty. I nodded. The prosecutor adjusted his tie and stepped forward again. To clarify for the court, did your firm have knowledge that the subject of the investigation was your sister at the time of the audit? I shook my head. No. Her name wasn't attached to the flag data set. When her identity was revealed as a co-founder, it was a surprise. And did you recuse yourself at that point? Yes. I removed myself from the file and transferred oversight to a colleague. Why did you come here today? A fair question. But not one with a clean answer. To watch, I said simply. To witness. To finally see the people who erased me held accountable for their own choices. Vanessa's lawyer stood up. Objection, Your Honor. This is turning into a personal narrative, irrelevant to the facts of the case. The judge raised an eyebrow. Overruled. It's relevant when the same family who built a narrative around this defendant's credibility has now been exposed for misleading public and private institutions. Boom. That landed. My mother slouched down in her chair like she could sink through the floor. When I stepped down from the witness stand, the gallery didn't look at me the same. Even the journalists were whispering to each other, eyes flicking between me and Vanessa. I returned to my seat. Sat down like nothing had happened. But it had. The mask they wore for decades had cracked, and now everyone could see what was underneath. Rotten favoritism. Polished lies. And the one child they swore had failed? Sitting calmly in the courtroom that was about to decide the fate of their golden girl. Karma didn't always knock. Sometimes it took the witness stand and signed a testimony. The next day, court resumed. Vanessa didn't look at me. Not once. Her posture had changed. Gone was the smug rigidity, the proud chin tilt. She looked tired. Her lawyer barely held it together. He knew public opinion had shifted. That the jury was no longer sympathetic to the elegant founder with the sharp jawline and staged sincerity. Now she was the woman who threw her own brother away and hoped no one noticed. Too late. The prosecution wrapped up with a slideshow. A final one. Photos of altered bank records. Logs of encrypted messages. Memos with fake timestamps. And then, one unexpected slide. A childhood photo. Me and Vanessa. Back when we were kids. She was dressed as a princess. I was blurry in the background, clearly mid-blink, holding a plastic sword and looking utterly ignored. My heart stopped. I hadn't seen that photo in over 20 years. Where did they find it? The prosecutor pointed to it. This is what deception looks like when it's practiced from an early age. When one child learns to perform and one learns to disappear. Objection. Sustained. The photo came down. But the damage lingered. It wasn't about the image. It was about the unspoken truth. Everyone in that courtroom now understood. This didn't start with the fraud. It started with the family. When court adjourned for the day, I headed toward the exit. I didn't expect anyone to follow me. But a voice stopped me at the door. Matthew. I turned. It wasn't Vanessa. It was one of the jurors. A woman. Middle-aged. Stern-faced. She stepped closer and lowered her voice. I just wanted to say, you weren't invisible. Not today. Then she walked off. I stood frozen for a moment. Not because I needed validation, but because I'd spent my whole life not hearing it. The courtroom was different the next day. Not physically, but in the energy. Jurors avoided eye contact with Vanessa now. Her lawyer kept fidgeting with his papers, like maybe if he shuffled hard enough, he could bury the truth under legal jargon. But nothing could unhear what had already echoed through that room. My sister had always known how to manipulate a room. Smile right, blink slowly, insert the perfect pause. But she'd never had to perform for consequences before. And now that her old tricks didn't work on a federal judge, she looked like a movie star with no lines. The trial was supposed to last a month. It was heading toward a conclusion in half that. Evidence piled up. And the court had no more patience for sob stories. On day 4, the defense tried a new angle. A last-ditch effort to paint Vanessa as misguided, not malicious. Her lawyer called her to the stand. My sister took a shaky breath and walked to the front. The same courtroom that had applauded her confidence on day 1 now stared with suspicion. She sat, was sworn in. And then came the performance of her life. She cried. She trembled. She spoke in soft, broken tones. She said she was pressured. That she didn't understand the full scale. That the company moved faster than she could keep up with. That she signed what she was told to sign. That she was a figurehead, not the mastermind. It was Oscar-level acting. Until the prosecutor stood up. Miss Whitmore, he began, calm and razor-sharp. You stated you were unaware of the mismanagement of funds? Yes, she said, voice trembling perfectly. Not until much later. And this email. He clicked, pulling up a digital message on the courtroom screen. With your signature authorizing the backdated accounts? Her throat moved in a visible swallow. Someone else must have. He clicked again. Another message. This time with her initials in the metadata. A tracked edit. Confirmed IP. Also you? Vanessa's eyes darted. I don't remember writing that. He clicked a third time. A selfie. Taken from her office. The same moment the edits were saved. Timestamped. Labeled. There was no escape. Vanessa stared at the screen like it was a mirror that finally refused to lie to her. Her lawyer looked like he'd aged 10 years in 3 minutes. Nothing further, the prosecutor said and returned to his seat. The room exhaled in one collective breath. I didn't smile. I didn't smirk. I just watched. The way they once watched me pack my bags and leave through the back door without even asking where I'd go. Outside, during recess, I stood by the vending machines near the restrooms. My coffee had gone cold. My mind buzzed with 1,000 things, and somehow, nothing at all. That's when I heard her heels clicking behind me. I didn't turn. But I felt her stop beside me. Why'd you come back? Vanessa asked, her voice stripped of polish. I stayed silent. Was it just to humiliate me? I turned to face her. She looked human. Not untouchable. Just tired. Her makeup didn't hide the dark circles. Her posture had lost its sharpness. No, I said. I came because I never got to finish watching you pretend. She winced. I always knew I'd be the scapegoat. I added. I just didn't know I'd be the insurance policy too. What does that mean? She snapped. I met her eyes. You used our family's silence as leverage. Told investors your brother was unstable. That he ran off. That I was a liability who couldn't keep a job. She blinked. You don't know that. Your LinkedIn page listed me under personal setbacks for 5 years. She opened her mouth, then shut it again. You made sure they forgot me. I continued. Until the day you needed me gone. Clean. Deleted. Her voice shook. I was a kid, Matthew. We were kids. I didn't know what I was doing. You knew enough to smile when Mom called me the child we don't talk about. Her breath hitched. I stepped closer. You're not afraid of jail, I said. You're afraid of being average. That landed. She turned her head slightly, blinking hard. Then, in a whisper I almost didn't hear. I didn't think you'd make it without us. And there it was. The truth. The root of all of it. They didn't abandon me because they forgot me. They abandoned me because they needed me to fail. It was the only way their version of the story made sense. The next morning, I didn't go straight into the courtroom. I sat outside on a bench beneath a line of tired old trees, coffee in hand, watching people pass without noticing me. Funny how I'd lived most of my life being invisible, and now, that was my advantage. No one knew what to do with me. Not the attorneys. Not the jury. Not even my family. Especially not them. Inside, the trial was winding down. Closing arguments were scheduled. The evidence was damning. Vanessa's lawyer had gone from confident to cornered. His closing pitch sounded more like a eulogy. Even the court staff looked exhausted. The judge? Stone-faced but tired. The kind of tired you only get when someone keeps insisting they're the victim while standing knee-deep in proof they aren't. Vanessa stared at the table through most of it. No eye contact. No fake smiles. I'd seen her wear many masks. But this? This was the first time I saw her barefaced. And behind all the charm and shine was just fear. After court adjourned, the judge dismissed the jury to deliberate. There were whispers about how quickly they might come back. Some said hours. Others guessed a day. I knew the truth. They already knew. So I left. Didn't need to see the gavel drop. I'd already watched the real trial, one that lasted 20 years. I stopped at a diner down the street. A greasy booth, bitter coffee, and silence. That's all I needed. I was halfway through a plate of cold fries when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered anyway. Matthew? A voice said. Soft. Familiar. I already knew who it was. Mom. I didn't speak. I just wanted to say, thank you for not embarrassing us more than you did. My jaw clenched. That's what you're worried about. She paused. You know your sister wasn't always. No, I interrupted. No more excuses. No more rewriting the story. She sighed, tired. You've changed. I had to. You gave me no other choice. There was a long silence. Then, your father's not well. I didn't reply. I thought maybe you'd want to visit. That sentence hung in the air like mold. You're reaching out now? I asked quietly. After all this? After years of pretending I didn't exist? You're still my son, she said. That almost made me laugh. You should have remembered that when I was eating dinner alone in my room while you hosted fundraisers for Vanessa's cello competitions. She had no answer. So I gave her one. I wish you well, I said. But I'm done carrying guilt I didn't earn. And I hung up. Back at the hotel, I got a text from an attorney I knew from the case. One sentence. Guilty on all counts. Vanessa would be sentenced in 6 weeks. I didn't feel triumphant. Just finished. Later that night, as I packed my things to leave the city, a message came through social media. From someone I hadn't seen since high school. I saw the trial. I didn't know. I'm sorry for believing what they said about you. That was the part that stuck. The belief. Everyone believed I was the failure. Because my family needed me to be. So they could shine brighter by comparison. But now, they didn't shine. They shattered. And I didn't have to prove anything anymore. 6 weeks passed like fog, slow, quiet, then suddenly gone. The day of Vanessa's sentencing, I almost didn't go. Not because I was over it, but because part of me felt like I'd already said everything that mattered. I'd faced them. I'd spoken the truth. I'd been seen. But something pulled me back. Not for her. For myself. One last chapter to close. The courtroom was packed. Not media this time, just people. Former clients, old colleagues, community members. The ones who used to repost Vanessa's TEDx talks and female founder interviews like she was royalty. Now they sat in silence, eyes down, like they were trying to figure out how they'd been fooled so long. Vanessa stood when called. She wore gray this time. Not elegant. Not flashy. Her voice was steady, but flat. When asked if she had anything to say, she paused. Glanced toward her attorney, then the judge. And then, briefly, toward me. Only then did she speak. I was raised to believe performance was more important than truth, she said. That froze the room. My family taught me to be polished, polite, perfect. And when I realized I wasn't, I faked it. And then I kept faking it until I couldn't stop. Her hands trembled as she folded them in front of her. I don't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I do want to say, to the people I hurt, and especially the person I erase. She looked at me again. I'm sorry. A pause. A real one. Not for effect. Not for image. The courtroom held still. Then she sat. And the judge delivered the sentence. 6 years in federal prison. Eligible for parole in 3. Vanessa nodded. No tears. No pleading. Just a quiet acceptance. And somehow, that was the loudest thing she'd ever done. Outside the courtroom, I stood in the sun for a while. My mother didn't approach me this time. Neither did anyone else. Not out of fear. But out of recognition. There was nothing left to say. Later that night I got a letter. Typed. No return address. I knew who it was from before I opened it. Matthew. I don't expect you to write back. I just needed you to know I meant what I said. Not because I want redemption, because you deserve someone to finally tell you the truth. You were never the failure. I just wasn't brave enough to admit I was. I folded the letter. Didn't burn it. Didn't post it online. Just slid it into a drawer and shut it. Because closure isn't loud. Sometimes it's the quietest sound in the world. 1 month after sentencing, I moved. Not because I was hiding. Because I was done returning. I had faced the place that abandoned me. I sat across from ghosts in living form. And I walked away, not angry. Not broken. Just done. I leased a small house on the edge of the city. Quiet street. Soft light. No memories clinging to the walls. A place I could belong to without explaining why I was there. One evening, I got a knock at the door. Not dramatic. Just soft. I opened it to find a man in a suit. Late 50s. He introduced himself as Judge Holloway. The same judge from the trial. I was in the neighborhood, he said. Wanted to speak to you. Just a moment if you'll allow it. I stepped aside. He walked slowly, respectfully. Didn't sit until I offered. You don't know this, he said, but I knew your father. A long time ago. We attended law school together. I remember him showing me a photo of his kids. Your sister in ballet tights. You, holding a book. He smiled faintly. And then, years later, I see you in my courtroom. Quiet. Unannounced. And I think he made it. I didn't respond. I don't often get to see stories resolve, he continued. Usually, I sentence them and move on. But yours stayed with me. Why? I finally asked. Because you didn't show up to gloat. You didn't come to take revenge. You came for the truth. And you left it there. That's rare. He stood. Smoothed his coat. You're more than what they made you. And I hope you know that's not just symbolic. That's factual. Then he left. I stood in the doorway a long time after he was gone. That night, I opened an old hard drive. It had my first project on it. The one I built in the back corner of a library computer station. The script that evolved into the digital audit tool that exposed Vanessa's fraud. I watched the lines of code flicker on screen. I didn't feel rage. Or pride. Just gratitude. Not for what happened. But for who I became because of it. Weeks later, I got another letter. From a stranger. A girl who'd followed the trial. She'd found me through an article someone posted about the family fallout. She wrote, My parents made me feel invisible, too. But now I know that silence isn't the end of the story. It's the space where a new one can begin. Thank you. I sat with that letter for a long time. Then I wrote her back. Epilogue. I never spoke to my mother again. She sent one more email. I didn't open it. She had years to say something real. She used them all to stay silent. Vanessa was transferred to a low-security federal facility. I read somewhere she's helping inmates apply for GED programs. I hope it's genuine. I don't know if I'll ever write to her again. But I don't need to. The weight's gone. Not because they lifted it. Because I set it down. I wasn't the failure. I was the foundation. And I've never stood taller.